Story 1. We are in a politically stable and reasonable period of history. Absolutely nothing comes to mind. Story 2. The Panama Files include some very interesting individuals. People 50 years from now will question why they were not convicted, if they even exist, given the current trend of artificial intelligence taking over jobs. Story 3. The entirety of the last 10 years. Maybe the next 10 too. Hopefully not, but I am not holding my breath. Story 4. I think once the initial distributed open government environment implementation is investigated, that is going to become a huge scandal. I refuse to believe that massive amounts of data of United States citizens were not pulled to private servers owned by Elon Musk's companies. It will probably be the largest data breach in United States history, and information technology infrastructure threat books will have entire chapters devoted to it. Story 5. No one even talks about January 6th anymore. In 50 years, it will be a milestone for something. I am not sure we know exactly what yet, though. Story 6. Election interference to vote for a child molester twice. Story 7. Is this really a necessary question? This is obvious karma farming. Story 8. At that time, the President of the United States decided to order the armed occupation of the nation's capital by members of the military to distract from the fact that he broke a campaign promise to release information and may, in fact, be incriminated by evidence of a massive child exploitation ring. Furthermore, his entire political party was accepting of these actions. Story 9. Russia installing Donald Trump twice, or maybe the fact that we let it happen. Story 10. A murdering war criminal meeting a child molester who happens to be the commander-in-chief, rolling out the red carpet and referring to the war criminal as His Excellency at a United States military base on United States soil. Story 11. The amount of investment in propaganda and psychological research, and how the human brain has been influenced by triggering tribalism through fake social media accounts emulating real people to further entrench individuals into cognitive dissonance. They used the control tactics of organized religion as a blueprint and applied them to political parties. Even as a Democrat, this is something both factions on the far left and far right are guilty of. Extreme ideas need these tactics in order to survive criticism. I need to clarify something. From my experience in spaces considered heavily left-leaning, there is a moral panic over association in these spaces. The purity of your beliefs is questioned not by what you believe, but based on the products, media you consume, and people you interact with. Currently, if you eat at McDonald's, you would be considered pro-genocide. There are left spaces that judge your character based on your purchases rather than simply sticking to the fact that if you spend money at McDonald's, the money goes to franchise owners who support Israel. I grew up in a very cult-like Christian church organization. We were not allowed to watch certain movies or listen to worldly music. We believed that if Israel ever fell in war, the world would literally end, and more. As a child, I was shamed for liking Pokemon because the monsters were demon-like. Guilt by association is one of the main manipulation tactics used by Christian churches. I know that not all left-leaning people use these tactics, so I use the term far left, which was technically imprecise, but these tactics are used by dogmatic churches. I stand by the fact that the way these spaces made me feel is exactly like what I experienced in that Christian church. It is my hope that people who have not gone this far will read these words and not become defensive, stating the obvious. Not all left-leaning people use these tactics found in religion, just as people on the right do not all use the same tactics. Story 12. Merrick Garland was negligent in not arresting Donald Trump following January 6th. Story 13. How can people defend a molester, racist, or liar who was elected president? Story 14. We are living through the fall of Rome. In 50 years, when China is the only superpower and the United States is now much more like the United Kingdom today, culturally influential but economically less powerful, this period will be seen as where it all began to fall apart. The second Trump administration, acting out of fear by voters and self-interest by former President Donald Trump, intentionally torpedoed all of our soft power and squandered our control of the world economy. This will be as much a mystery to future generations as watching the United Kingdom completely squander all the disproportionate power it held in the European Union through Brexit. It is incredible. In both cases, wealthy interests use social media to make the working classes completely shoot themselves in the foot, all to protect the wealthy from banking disclosure laws in the United Kingdom and taxes in the United States. In both cases, they convinced people that immigrants were the problem, not the massive and rapidly expanding income inequality. Story 15. I hope that if the Epstein files ever see the light of day and people are held accountable, it could certainly be a major scandal. However, at this rate, I doubt it. Story 16. None except the Epstein list. We have been experiencing events that would end any other administration every single week. Story 17. The worst president my country ever had won the presidency for a second term after he was convicted on 34 felony charges. Story 18. McConnell not even giving President Obama's nominees to fill the Supreme Court seat vacated by Justice Scalia's death a hearing, and the whole country basically just shrugging and allowing that to happen, will stand as a definitive event of our time and a prelude to even more that followed. Story 19. The United States overthrows the regime and declares itself democratic again. Story 20. Whatever is hidden in the death of Jeffrey Epstein, we may never know the truth. Story 21. The Trump presidency and the decline of democracy in the United States of America. Story 22. The entire Trump presidency involved treasonous behavior, betrayal of allies, exploitation of women and children, criminal fraudulent activities in his businesses, constant use of taxpayer dollars to support his own companies, manipulation of the stock markets with inconsistent tariffs, misuse of cryptocurrency for bribery, and the selling of pardons to political donors. It is difficult to imagine what future generations will think of us when they realize we elected this individual twice. Story 23. There is no verified evidence to support the claim that Donald Trump committed such an act. Story 24. It has only been 20 years since a president got the job because his brother helped him steal a state, and then he launched an illegal war for oil profits that killed millions. We do not have massive scandals anymore. We nod, bury our dead, and move on with our lives. Story 25. The former president's crypto dinner, the taxpayer paying for converting his free plane, then he gets to take it with him, the former president taking over the Kennedy Center and the people he selects to receive honors, the former president pardoning the insurrectionists. This is just a small sample of what I expect will be an entire term of scandals. Story 26. Probably Donald Trump becoming the first United States of America dictator, or at least getting dangerously close to it. Story 27. Trump reduced pandemic prevention and mitigation measures before the emergence of the coronavirus viral strain. President Biden warned about this in October 2019. Story 28. Every single action taken by Donald Trump and his Make America Great Again supporters. Story 29. We have midterm elections. There won't be any elections that matter anymore. Story 30. As if there is going to be a country 50 years from now. Story 31. Dogecoin. The iceberg of criminal activity is massive, and we have yet to discover its full extent. Story 32. Fake elector scheme, January 6th, and then we re-elected the individual. That is just the broad strokes. People are going to rightly condemn this as one of the most unwise generations in American history. Story 33. January 6th, the 5 years that preceded it, and anything following 2025. Story 34. Oh boy, I cannot wait to see this. Definitely polite and not at all politically charged comments section. Story 35. The 2024 presidential election in which a convicted felon and adjudicated rapist won all 7 swing states. Story 36. Biden was elected, not because it was actually a scandal, but because the Make America Great Again political movement ruling at that time labeled it as such. Story 37. American soldiers laying a red carpet for Vladimir Putin to walk on within the United States. Story 38. The handling by the West and the servants of the People Party of the Russo-Ukrainian War. Story 39. Obviously, the time that Barack Obama dishonored America and showed his true allegiance to the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, Al-Qaeda, and evil all at the same time by wearing a tan suit is unmatched. Nothing since comes close. Story 40. Spending years systematically covering up the fact that the leader of the free world had advanced dementia. Story 41. The Red Dunce Cap Movement. 50 years from now, people will deny their families were ever part of Make America Great Again, and old social media posts will be uncovered to damage the career aspirations of the descendants of that group. Story 42. Republican Party conventions during the Trump era. Story 43. The Epstein Files and the Second Great Depression we are heading into. Story 44. Bribery involving billions of dollars, dozens of unconstitutional orders, billions in money-making schemes, and abuse of power, including death threats toward citizens. It is happening as we speak. Story 45. Anything related to Donald Trump. He is a pedophile in case anyone forgot. Story 46. The Supreme Court of the United States decisions essentially stated that Donald Trump is above the law. This is clearly not what the Constitution intended. Story 47. Literally anything related to Donald Trump. For some reason, it is not a major scandal now, but it should be. Story 48. The election of a pedophile and child rapist as President of the United States of America is incredible, especially considering that no one seems able to do anything about it. Story 49. Europe is introducing chat control and total surveillance of its inhabitants. Story 50. Probably the one time Barack Obama wore a tan suit or Volodymyr Zelensky did not say thank you. Story 51. For me, the current success of right-wing conservative populism involves exactly the voters who would suffer most and benefit least if the policies of these parties were implemented. Despite this fact, they are able to win voters by enraging them, blaming the left and green parties even though these groups have never held a majority or power in some countries, and by blaming a mysterious elite which, in fact, consists entirely of the people and powers behind the right-wing conservative parties. The scandal, for me, is mainly about three things: the amount of shameless lying they use as a tactic, that they do not genuinely care about their voters and make their lives worse, that technology companies play a significant role in this with their social media algorithms. Story 52. People in the future will be shocked by what our contemporaries did. Story 53. United States abandonment of the Constitution and transition to authoritarian rule. Story 54. None. People cannot even remember what happened last week. Story 55. Trump was president twice. They will think we were morons like him. Story 56. I think that failing to remove Donald Trump from office after either of his two impeachments will be considered as shameful as the actions he took to merit impeachment. Story 57. Can you consider every day of an administration an event? Story 58. The release of the Epstein files should be addressed as soon as possible. Story 59. The debt clock is ticking. The economic collapse is imminent. Story 60. I don't know if this qualifies as a scandal specifically, but it is absolutely wild to me how, in all the Trump craziness, it is not mentioned more that he is responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths. We cannot blame him for all coronavirus disease 2019 deaths, but we do know that the United States of America had a significantly higher death rate than other countries, and we know that is because of Donald Trump's lack of action as he tried to dismiss it. He then heavily politicized the issue, causing many people to not take steps to keep themselves and their communities safe. He is responsible for more American deaths than any war in history except possibly the Civil War, depending on what percentage of deaths you would attribute to his mismanagement, and it is completely glossed over. Story 61. The 2016 election was stolen for Donald Trump, again in 2024, and every single thing he has done since about 2015. Story 62. I firmly believe that the current administration is doing everything it can to erase all history of former President Barack Obama and former Vice President Joe Biden. Therefore, attempting to restore their place in history may cause controversy at that time. Story 63. The 2024 United States election. There is no way that Donald Trump was the legitimate winner, but the powers that assisted him are keeping their heads down for now. If this is found to be treasonous, it will become a capital punishment offense. Story 64. The invasion and occupation of Iraq in 2003 is already seen as a massive scandal more than 20 years later. I believe people in 50 years will recognize it as an indefensible, unjustifiable war crime, along with the rest of the global war on terrorism. We destroyed a nation, killed hundreds of thousands, maimed and displaced millions, and ruined a country and region for decades just to satisfy our desire for revenge after September 11th. It was horrible all around. Story 65. Literally everything from the last 7 months, and whatever new difficulties Donald Trump drags us into in the coming years. Regardless of whether or not he completes the term, the damage he has done will have lasting effects for probably the rest of our lives. Story 66. Well, I guess depending on how the next couple of decades go in Western politics, right now might either be the Dark Right Age, which will hopefully have finished, or the Second Enlightenment, which I presume will be mandatory learning. The Handmaid's Tale will look like a freer time. Story 67. All of them? There is a new one nearly every day in the United States. Story 68. Recall the massive amounts of deception by corporate media and government officials. This clip provides a refresher. This provided excuses for President Joe Biden to stay in his basement more than usual during the campaign and excuses to weaken election protections. Story 69. Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. Story 70. I do not know. Barack Obama wore a tan suit once. Story 71. The handling of the coronavirus disease 2019 by multiple governments is going to age very badly. What part do you think they will try to rewrite? Story 72. The fact that you assume humans will still be here 50 years from now is quite surprising. Story 73. The sitting United States president is rolling out a literal red carpet for Vladimir Putin while his invasion of Ukraine continues. Story 74. I am having trouble thinking of something that is seen as a massive political scandal today that was not also seen that way while it was occurring. Story 75. We cannot even see obvious ones happening right in front of us today. I doubt we will see them any more clearly looking back from the future. Story 76. Strong Western support for Israel amidst its ongoing actions, due in large part to lobbying, Israel exaggerating anti-Semitism and undermining efforts to tackle actual anti-Semitism, which is a real problem, unlike opposition to Zionism, which is simply anti-nationalism. For a concrete example, the United Kingdom government choosing to prescribe Palestine Action as a terrorist group, making it illegal even to publicly support it, following meetings behind closed doors with the Israeli arms company targeted, will not be viewed kindly in the future regardless of other opinions on the topic. With a reaction like that, one might think they support shooting at starving civilians in Gaza, murdering journalists, bombing hospitals, or similar actions. However, the biggest scandals will be accepting donations from fossil fuel companies. History will judge us collectively for climate change, and it will not judge us kindly even in the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. Story 77. It is not going to be popular to say, but I think the Bidens had a large-scale influence peddling scheme going on. Story 78. Governments are giving up on addressing climate change because of a focus on economic growth, power, and wealth at all costs. Future generations will be very disappointed in us. Story 79. Obama Peace Prize. Not because he did not deserve it, but because history will be rewritten portraying him as the villain. Story 80. Both sides use gerrymandering and off-year elections to achieve an equal balance in the Senate. Both deep blue and deep red states will continue this practice, and the total number of seats cannot change. Story 81. Are you kidding me? This entire administration and former President Trump's administration. 50 years from now, I hope the world looks back at this and shames us. Story 82. The Trump administration will either be recognized as a lawless, corrupt, fascist attack on democracy, or it will be hailed as the historic rise of the great leader and founding father of the proud Republic of Trump Incorporated. There is no middle road. Story 83. 50 years? For Christ's sake, I hope that the real socialist revolution will have been successful by then. Story 84. You all assume history will judge the current climate poorly. There is a fair chance we are already halfway through the plot of idiocracy. People in 50 years could easily look back at today with favor. Society could also be completely ignorant or uninterested in history by then. Story 85. Biden has not been declared unfit to hold the office of president. Story 86. Trump showing deference to Vladimir Putin in Alaska. At least he did not give Alaska to Vladimir Putin. Story 87. Biden is mentally incapable of doing the job, and others covered for him. Story 88. The complete ownership of a United States political party by Russian compromising material all the way up to Agent Krasnov. Story 89. Bush versus Gore in 2000, but only if Make America Great Again is somehow defeated. Story 90. There will be a large release of unsealed documents after Donald Trump passes away. Story 91. I feel like during the first presidency of Donald Trump, they blamed fake news on Russia when, in my experience, it was mostly trolls on Reddit and 4chan just messing around. I believe that in the future, it will be revealed how much damage those memes and fake news caused, and how easily random users from Reddit changed a country's political scene. Hillary Clinton was not good, but she really should not have lost to Donald Trump. Story 92. Much of what is currently happening in the United States, but the Epstein files and January 6th attack will likely be seen as flashpoints. Story 93. Pierre Poilievre visiting a gay brothel in Lloydminster. People will be shocked that progressive Canadians still do not approve of a political leader exploring. Story 94. I can see a few pages in the history books containing information on how a president lied about election fraud and pushed his attorney general to also lie, causing that attorney general to wait until the vote was certified before resigning and stating under oath that the president became detached from reality. Then the acting attorney general testified that he was also pushed to lie about fraud and claimed the election was fraudulent. At least a few pages would suffice. Story 95. There will someday be a solemn museum dedicated to telling the stories of people the United States sent to Alligator Alcatraz and the Centro de Educación y Capacitación para la Observación y Técnicas. Story 96. The entire Trump era of truth is allowed to be documented and recorded. Story 97. I do not know if it has happened yet, but there will be a significant event in the West that is entirely the responsibility of unchecked large technology companies. Story 98. Funding, arming, and facilitating a genocide, United States and North Atlantic Treaty Organization complicity. Story 99. Be realistic. Society does not have 50 years left. Anyone who thinks otherwise is not paying attention. Story 100. Perhaps scandal is not the right term, but Barack Obama's novel use of executive orders to push policy completely transformed the office of the presidency as well as what the public expects of the president. 100 years from now, this will be the primary thing he is remembered for. Story 101. Obama and that tan suit. It was clear evidence that he was unfit to be president, yet he got away with it. Story 102. The coordinated effort to hide Joe Biden's mental decline from the public. Story 103. We will eventually prove that Thomas Crooks was hired by the Donald Trump presidential campaign. Story 104. The ethnic cleansing of Gaza, the dehumanization of the Palestinians, and the military targeting of foreign journalists and aid workers. Story 105. Honorable Majesty Donald Trump passed away today at age 103. Story 106. Anything Donald Trump had done. Or it would be if the United States of America had any sense. Story 107. Hopefully, Donald Trump's corruption and self-enrichment will be seen as totally criminal. Story 108. It is interesting to imagine what they will choose. Maybe they will just call Donald Trump the mad one, and talk about redrawing maps with markers, wanting to stop hurricanes with nuclear weapons, and injecting bleach to see what happens. Story 109. Backing Ukraine is going to go very badly much sooner than 50 years. The situation there is far more complex than most people understand. It is not just a case of Russia invading Ukraine. There has been a brutal civil war going on for 12 years. Also, if Hamas is not eliminated, and if Israel is not supported, they may carry out another attack similar to October 7th, possibly outside of Israel. Story 110. Emergency services, Obama's drone campaign, the entirety of Trump's activities and Pizzagate, Epstein's files, and Hampstead. Pizzagate was real and covered up. Epstein did not kill himself and was supplying children to politicians and people of power. Hampstead was not a hoax. I will be called whatever and I do not care. Sick, repugnant people run this world, and it should be discussed. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.